So as people continue to join us, again, I want to welcome you. I want to thank you all for coming. I do want to briefly acknowledge that this entire event was kind of started, the seed was started by our departed Dave Tiffany, whose life we celebrated this weekend. And the relationship that he forged with one of our visitors from Afghanistan right before COVID shut all those visits down. And so I do want to acknowledge that. I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge tonight, that again, this event is happening because of his very active and dedicated and inspiring role in CIVIC for so many years. With that, I also want to let people know, and there'll be more formal announcements of this coming, but the board has voted to rename CIVIC's endowment fund, that's with the Community Foundation of Johnson County, in Dave Tiffany's memory. And so that will be happening soon, and we'll be notifying you all about that as well. But we just believe that these issues of Afghan resettlement, of refugee resettlement as a whole in our communities in Eastern Iowa is really closely linked and synced with the heart of our message and mission at CIVIC. And we're really excited to have you all here to learn more. We all have been wanting to dig in and learn more about what's happening, about what we can do, about how we can give. And this is a way for us to, in person, in real time, be engaged with people who are coming from different parts of the world to Eastern Iowa, which we've been sorely lacking otherwise in this virtual world of visits. And so we're excited tonight to have some speakers speak firsthand that are either involved in these efforts or have come from Afghanistan to Iowa to join us here in living and working and studying. And so I want to just give you a little bit of an overview of how the evening will work. Our plan is to start with our visitor, Sara Zenjnic from the Catherine McAuley Center. She is the Director of Refugee Services there at the center. And so she has an abundance of information to share with us about the process, about what's going on, about the needs beyond financial needs, about ways that any of us can be involved in welcoming more than 200 now Afghan refugees to our area. And there'll be times during her sharing that we will ask for you to put your questions, things in the chat. Dylan and Abby from our staff are going to help us monitor that. And after Sara shares with us, we're going to hear from Hikmatullah Jamili, who is originally from Afghanistan and has been living and studying and working here in Eastern Iowa, and about his experiences. And at the end, we really want to encourage people to use the raise hand function. If it's difficult for you to find, if you haven't used it before, you may have to click participants at the bottom of your Zoom screen and find your name in the list of participants. And there should be a place either by your name or at the bottom of the names to say raise hand. And our staff and board will help monitor that as well, so that then you can unmute and ask questions or share your own experience about how you've been getting involved in these efforts in our communities. We would love to hear that from you. But while our speakers are sharing, we do ask that you keep your microphones on mute and wait to be acknowledged with that raise hand function to jump in. But we do want interaction, we do want discussion, we want conversation. here at the end. So again, thank you for being here. It's been too long since we've gotten to see each other and be together and see each other's faces. So we want to make sure you know you are welcome here. Also throughout the night, Dylan will be sharing links that are valuable or helpful for you to know how to give. Remember, all donations to CIVIC this week, unless specified otherwise, will be going to the Catherine McAuley Center's resettlement efforts, as well as new memberships. So if you join CIVIC, if you make a donation, all of those are donations directly to those efforts this week. So again, thank you for being here. Sara from the Catherine McAuley Center, we're so excited that you're here, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the support that you're providing to Catherine McAuley Center and to the community as a whole. Like Amy said, my name is Sara Zenjnic. I'm the Director of Refugee and Immigrant Services at Catherine McAuley Center, which means that I oversee all of the case management and employment services that we provide to refugees and immigrants in the community. We'll go through a brief presentation, kind of overviewing the work that we do at CMC, and I'll try to add in information that's more specific to the Afghan resettlement efforts and how things relate to Afghans. But something I just want to point out to begin with is that with the status that Afghans have entered into the country with, all of the services and programs that we offer through Catherine McAuley Center and that we've offered for several years are available to our Afghan neighbors. So there's a kind of constant learning for us of how to make services and programs accessible and make sure they're meeting the need of a newer population that we are now serving. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here. And we'll get the slideshow started. So like I said, we'll go through some basics about CMC, a little bit about our Refugee and Immigrant Services program, review kind of what our role is in resettlement, and talk about community and volunteer engagement opportunities, and have some time for additional questions. But like we discussed, we'll talk as we go, and I'll pause for some opportunities to have some more discussion as we go through the presentation. So starting with a little bit about Catherine McAuley Center, CMC was founded in 1989 by the Sisters of Mercy, initially to offer education to women studying for their GED. And then we shortly after that opened our Women's Services program to offer transitional housing and other supportive services to women in need. Those two programs have operated jointly for many years before the Refugee and Immigrant Services program came to be. You know, really throughout our history, CMC's programs and services have adapted to meet the changing needs of the community, and in response to a growing immigrant population and identifying ESL needs and connections that we have through our English as a second language program, those changes culminated in the launch of our Refugee and Immigrant Services program in about 2016. Through the Refugee and Immigrant Services program, we provide a range of services to immigrants and refugees, including resettlement. And we'll talk through brief in a little bit kind of what services look like. And, you know, ultimately our goal is to be able to offer hope and opportunity through educational and supportive services that promote stability, skill building, and connection, and really work to create an inclusive community for our neighbors. So I always start every presentation with a conversation about some definitions, just to make sure that we're speaking the same language, because oftentimes these words are used incorrectly. Well-intentioned people use the term that comes to mind most quickly, but they are all terms that are very clearly defined in immigration law, and sometimes they're misrepresented, but when we're talking, it's important to make sure that we're using the correct types of terms. So the first is an immigrant. What is an immigrant? An immigrant is really this umbrella term of someone who's made a decision to move from their home country, and move to another country with the intention of settling there, often for economic reasons or just security and stability. So an immigrant includes people who have valid documentation, as well as people who enter without inspection or may have overstayed visas. But it is a term that encompasses people who are here for, a set period of time. So temporary visitors and business visitors don't typically qualify under this type of definition of immigrant, because their visits are very short and time limited. The next term that we often hear is an asylum seeker or asylum. And an asylum seeker is someone who is seeking international protection, but their claim for protection for refugee status hasn't yet been determined. And so it's someone, in our case, who enters into the United States. We hear it most frequently in conjunction with the southern border. And they're living in the United States while they wait for their legal claim and their immigration case to be processed. Once they do receive a status, oftentimes that takes many years. We've heard 5 to 7 years is kind of an average. But once they receive that status, then they have been granted asylum. And that comes with a whole different set of legal rights and responsibilities. And then the last status that we had operated with for a long time is refugee status. And that's someone who's been forced to flee their home country based on a well-founded fear of persecution because of their race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion. And because of these reasons, they're unable to go home because they're fearful of persecution. And things are ever changing. And so the most recent status that we've learned very quickly about and worked very closely with is humanitarian parole. And that's the status that has been granted to a large number of the Afghans that were evacuated from Afghanistan back in the fall and late summer. The humanitarian parole status is a status that's granted by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. It's when it's deemed that there's an urgent humanitarian need for the individual to be able to enter the United States. So, the evacuation from Afghanistan is really that prime example of an urgent need for people to be able to enter into the United States. There has been some legislation that happened that allowed Afghans with humanitarian parole as their entrance status to be able to receive all of the same services that refugees and people who've been granted asylum are eligible for. The kind of unique restriction with Afghans right now is that there currently is no path to citizenship for Afghans who have been granted humanitarian parole. They have to apply for a different status within the first couple years of coming here. Many will apply for asylum. And there also isn't currently a process for Afghans who have been granted parole to apply for family to reunite with them here in the United States. So if people left husbands or wives or children in Afghanistan in the kind of rapidity of the evacuation, there is no current process for them to be able to apply for their family to come join them. So when we look at kind of who is doing this work, I always like to give credit to my team because I can come and speak to you, but we have a wonderfully talented and diverse and passionate team that does the work and carries out the work on a daily basis. And so just wanted to share with you some of their faces. We have very much worked hard and diligently to provide, ensure that our staff have specialized experience providing case management, providing supportive services. Many of our staff are also members of the refugee and immigrant communities. Many do speak the languages of the refugees and immigrants that we work with. And because of their expertise, we are able to deliver programming that meets the needs of the community. We're able to be responsive to the needs of our community, and really coordinate with our internal staff to identify and really evaluate the programs that we're operating and make sure that they're responsive to the needs. We also host a number of Refugee Rise and other iterations of AmeriCorps members that we are eternally grateful for their service and the work that they do to grow our programming and support the work that we are able to complete and really kind of diversify our portfolio of experiences. So to dive into kind of what we do and how we do it on a daily basis, Catherine McAuley Center is an approved resettlement agency under a national organization called the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. We are the only resettlement agency that operates in Eastern Iowa. So we provide the initial resettlement services to refugees as they come into the country, and now also to Afghans as they're leaving the military bases that they were originally staying on after being evacuated and now entering into local communities. So here's kind of an idealized version of what the first 90 days that someone might experience in the United States, what services we are required to provide in creating that foundation for life in the United States. We do, know that many of these things play off of one another. So housing determines what school district children are enrolled in, and employment impacts where people are able to find housing, what the cost, what their household budget might look like. So while it's nice to think of it in a linear process, it's often plays out in more of kind of a web of all of these services and kind of playing off of the interactions and the connections between them. This is the process for refugees, as we have offered the program for about 7 years at this point. And then in about mid-August, when we knew that there were evacuations occurring and that Afghans would be starting to join local communities, at the time it was a little bit of uncertainty of what to expect nationally, and especially what to expect in Eastern Iowa. And the uncertainty, CMC stood ready and willing to welcome Afghans. And we did the preparations necessary to learn about the culture, connect with local individuals from the region, and prepare. We didn't start to receive Afghans until about mid-October. And at which point we really doubled down and committed to resettling Afghans and working to make sure that we had culturally relevant services and culturally appropriate services. And so once that program was put into place on a national level, it was set up to mirror the resettlement services provided to refugees. So it's the same length of time, it's the same list of services that we provide, and there's only a few nuances based on that humanitarian parole status, and to some extent the rapidity with which Afghans were evacuated and then entering into local communities. And so of the populations that we are resettling, we have kind of, like I said, these two programs. We have the typical resettlement program for refugees, and then we have technically a separate program. We treat them very similarly, but we run on a federal fiscal year for both of those programs. We every year set projections of how many people we have the capacity to provide quality services to over the course of the year. And this year we set our projections at 150 refugees, 250 Afghan parolees. And so this year so far, of the people that we've resettled, we've had people arriving from Afghanistan, from Burma, from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and from Sudan. We've had a large number of people who are here singly. And I say it that way because especially with the Afghans, what we've experienced and what we've seen is a large number of men who, with how quickly they were forced to evacuate, had to make a very difficult decision to leave family behind. We've talked with a number of people who said, you know, I worked and lived in Kabul, and so when the call went out, I was able to quickly get to the airport, but my wife and my children lived in maybe an outlying province. And so they weren't able to get to Kabul quickly. And so then it's largely men, but there are some women in that situation as well, are here singly, but they very much are part of a family, and are, you know, constantly have that on their mind of where's their family, how are they doing, and how can they support their families. And then we do have about 40 families that range in size from 2 to, I think the largest we just got another case of 11 people. So some very large families, and the kind of interesting dynamics that come with the diversity of single people, small families, up to housing and providing services to a very large family. Of the clients that we've resettled so far this year, we've seen languages that include Arabic, Burmese, Dari, French, Kibembe, Kinyumalenge, Kiswahili, Kirundi, and Pashto. And we have almost all of those languages available through our staff, which is truly a blessing, that we are able to use internal staff to develop those relationships and have trusted conversations in languages that people are comfortable with. And then this year we've seen 141 youth, 141 children aged 0 to 18, and 171 adults. We've got a number of individuals who are pregnant and expecting. We recently welcomed our first baby of the year. So it is exciting to welcome a new citizen in this situation to the United States, who's able to join their family. And then we've got, as far as male-female breakdown, especially because of the numbers of the men that are here singly, about 2/3 to probably 5/6 of the people that we've resettled so far are men, and then the remainder are women. We've seen a little bit more of the heavy male presence this year because of the numbers of Afghans that had to flee on their own. So then when we look at kind of the wraparound services that are available through Catherine McAuley Center, we really try to make sure that 90 days of service and a foundation for life isn't enough for someone to find stability, for someone to be able to really feel settled in the United States, and to be able to navigate the new community. And so what we've done, and we work very hard to ensure that the services that we provide are available to anyone, and that they meet kind of all of the needs that people may have. So we have a number of different case management programming, ranging from an intensive case management program for people with high needs and higher barriers to kind of settling into life and navigating the local community. We've got a healthcare focused case management program that helps people understand chronic conditions, navigating the healthcare system. I fully admit I was born and raised in the US. I still get confused by our healthcare system. So it is wonderful that we're able to help people navigate a new system as they settle in. And then we've got resource navigation, which really provides a range of support based on the client's needs. We work to connect people with local resources, and really also to provide education to those local resources about how they can be responsive to the needs of people that we are referring to them. One of our newer programs in the Refugee and Immigrant Services Department is what we call Learning is for Everyone, or the LIFE program, which is focused on middle and high school age youth, helping them with some of their school, navigating the computer systems that are utilized in school, how to communicate with their teachers and advocate for themselves, helping them study English. We work closely with the Cedar Rapids School District to help reinforce the English that they're learning, so we can kind of help attempt to speed up their language acquisition. And we also do fun things, because why not get folks out into the community and help the middle school and high school youth have an opportunity to explore things like Wiki Up Nature Hill or the Eastern Iowa Arts Academy, and really kind of learn about the resources and kind of the fun things to do throughout the city and the area. And then we also offer employment services. We know that getting a job is a necessity in the United States. So you got to pay your bills. And oftentimes for immigrants and refugees, that first job is a kind of survival job. It's a job that people get because they need to pay their bills. And so through two different programs, one that's federally funded and one that's funded through local donations, that allows us to expand the eligibility for the programs. We work with people to identify their skills, their experience, and really what their employment goals are. We provide group classes and group employment readiness classes, and working to meet the needs and help people get connected to their first jobs, but then also taking it a step further and identifying how can we help people make progress towards those longer term career goals. We want people to be able to settle into kind of what they know and be able to bring their expertise to their lives in the United States. I was speaking recently with one of our new Afghan neighbors who is doing on that exact path. He got a job very quickly after arriving in Cedar Rapids, was fortunate to be hired in a manufacturing company. However, he has extensive experience in banking and has wide knowledge of financial systems and banking. And now we're looking at kind of what are the skills and experiences that he would need to gain to be able to get a career in the banking industry, so he can connect and pull that knowledge and experience that he's got with him into his life now in the United States as well. We also offer a childcare business development program that is open to our refugees and our Afghan parolees as well, where we train individuals on how to open in-home childcare businesses. We know there's a childcare shortage, and we know that things are even more challenging if you are from a different culture. You may not be able to speak the same language as your childcare provider. Your children may be used to eating different foods. And through offering this program, we're increasing the base of childcare providers and increasing the number of providers that share a cultural background, share language, share the same experiences as some of the people that are looking for childcare and are needing childcare to be able to go to work. So I will stop sharing for a little bit and pause there for a little bit of opportunity for questions on any of the services that CMC provides before we move into some of the opportunities for engagement.
Yeah, feel free if you have questions to put it in the chat or to use the raise hand. This is amazing. I know I can ask while we're waiting to see if other people have questions, Sarah. You said that we started receiving Afghan refugees in mid-October.
Mm-hmm.
Were they on bases from August until October when they were coming here?
Yes. So when the evacuation occurred, all of the Afghans that were evacuated and brought to the United States were brought to military bases. There were several military bases across the country that hosted. The closest was in Wisconsin. And people were living on military bases. Everything was very regimented, as you might imagine. And they were given everything that they needed. There was food provided to them. So it has been a very regimented life, and many people, all of them came directly off of the bases to Cedar Rapids. some by bus, some by plane, depending on which base they were coming from. And, you know, even the people we received last week had been on bases since they were evacuated. So quite a long time to be staying in a temporary situation.
Yeah, and we have a question in the chat. Where have the refugees been settled? Have any families or individuals been settled in Iowa City?
That is a wonderful question. So as a resettlement agency, we are able to provide services within roughly 100-mile radius from our office in Cedar Rapids. So typically when we resettle, that means we're going as far north as Waterloo. There's the refugee population in Waterloo. We obviously resettle in Cedar Rapids, but we also resettle large numbers of refugees in Iowa City, and then a handful in Columbus Junction as well. In kind of typical years, the disbursement of our refugees would have been about probably about a third in Iowa City, and then, you know, the bulk of the remainder were in Cedar Rapids, but some spread up in Waterloo and Columbus Junction as well. What we've seen so far with the Afghans is we've been talking to the Afghans about where they would like to live and giving them some education about the different communities that make up Eastern Iowa. And most people have chosen to stay in Cedar Rapids for now. But I know there have been connections made with individuals that live in Iowa City, and I anticipate that people will start to spread out a little bit more over the coming months and years.
That's really interesting. I have a follow-up to that, but let me call on Jane and Ron. They have their hand up to see what they had to ask as well.
Yeah.
Sarah, thank you for your presentation. It's most professional. I teach at the University of Iowa, and many of my students are international relations majors.
Yeah.
Who would like to be you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got this job? That's the first question. The second question is, can you give us a little profile of sort of the typical Afghan parolee, and just sort of about their background, their prospects here, and a little bit more kind of about the typical Afghan parolee that you're helping get settled.
Wonderful questions. Well, much appreciation and camaraderie with the international relations students. My bachelor's is in international relations and religion. I went to Wartburg College up in Waverly and studied international relations and religion. Took a year off to kind of find myself and figure out where I would go with that. And during that time, I met my now husband, who was a refugee that was resettled from Bosnia. And in getting to know him, we talked about, you know, what his experience was like coming to the United States. And he said there were these people who helped us go to school. They helped us my parents find jobs. And I said, that is my dream job. How do I do it? And so I received a master's degree in intercultural service leadership and management from a small school out in Vermont. And then just started working in internships in the field, getting experience, learning about different cultures and communities, and have since worked my way from really being an intern to now being the director of a resettlement service program. But I will say there are many paths into this field. We've got social workers, we've got clients that we resettled. One of the first refugees that we resettled is now one of our case managers, who has just really worked hard to kind of continue to seek out education and opportunities. And so it's been fun and to be able to continue to develop his skills and experience. And, you know, that's really where my goal lies, is I want to work myself out of a job because we've got a wealth of individuals who have lived experience, people who are from communities that have the knowledge and experience to be able to take on these roles, and be able to kind of build up that base more. So that's me, but more focus on our Afghans that we have welcomed so far. So far, we have welcomed 249 Afghans since, like I said, the middle of October is when people started to come. It started as a trickle, and about the middle of November, the floodgates opened and we got large numbers of people very quickly. The majority of people are here, or I would say, you know, there's that large number of men that are here singly, that left family behind. But we really see a mix of experiences and backgrounds with the Afghans that we've been working with so far. We've got mostly Pashtuns and Dari, people that have been resettled because that's the language that we had best access to prior to people arriving. But there are other languages spoken in Afghanistan. But those are the two groups that we felt we had the capacity to be able to serve locally. And with that, you know, different ethnic groups have slightly different backgrounds, but we've got people who are wonderfully communicative and expressive in English. And we've had some very in-depth conversations. And then we have some people who are illiterate in their native language. And it seems to be a fairly even split so far of people who have a familiarity with English and people who are illiterate. We are seeing with that a variety of backgrounds in education. A lot of people worked with or supported the US military and worked maybe in the embassy or were translators for the military or owned shops on military bases or worked closely with military members. And so with that, there's a wealth of experiences as well. It's always hard to kind of pinpoint and make generalizations because we do just see such a diversity of individuals that we've been working with.
I do not want to take away from other important information you have to share, Sarah, but I am personally wondering, but again, if it's going to take time from something more significant, I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit about what factors determine or what factors are playing into the decisions of where people want to be settled.
Yeah. So we brought everyone into Cedar Rapids initially, partially because of the airport. So it's just easier to pick people up at the airport, but also because it's where we're officed and where our staff work. So it's easier to keep people closer, especially when there isn't a large Afghan community in the area. And we were able to partner with a local hotel that was able to provide some temporary housing while we worked to find permanent housing and determine kind of where people wanted to land. It was, you know, we've talked with the vast majority, almost everyone that we've resettled is Muslim. And they've been welcomed and very well connected with the local mosque. So that having that faith community has really made a strong connection. And despite conversations about mosques in other areas, people really have just felt connected to Cedar Rapids and the community that's welcomed them so far. But like I said, we're seeing people get jobs outside of the Cedar Rapids metro and anticipate people starting to kind of move out as they start to get their feet under them a little more. I think we see that often with as people get settled, they start to feel more comfortable moving a little bit further because they're able to navigate and learn the new communities a little bit more easily.
Yeah, and what kind of jobs are they getting? And could maybe perhaps some of our attendees tonight might have connections that could help, you know, connect possible job opportunities, for example.
Yeah, so far most people have been getting some more heavy labor or entry level jobs. We've seen jobs in manufacturing and food production as initial jobs for many people, partially because the pay is high. Many of those jobs pay, you know, $18, $19 per hour. And because it is repetitive tasks, If you work food production, you may only be doing 1 or 2 movements all day. So that's easier to train someone with limited English.
Sure.
And some of the people with higher English then have been hired into roles where they're acting as lead team members or translators for their fellow employees. But we know we've heard from people interest in banking, interest in human services, interest in opening businesses, women interested in opening childcare centers. So we anticipate, especially, again, like housing, now that people are getting their feet under them, they've gotten an entry-level job, that people are starting to look more at what's sustainable for me and what really is my ultimate goal.
And if you're not going to get to this later, I would be interested in you commenting on, I know I received an email today or yesterday from CMC about contacting our representatives to try to push action to cover and protect these parolees for more than 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something you want to go ahead and speak to now or you're coming to later.
Absolutely. No, I think that is a great topic to discuss. So like I said, the current status that many Afghans have is humanitarian parole. That's how they were admitted to the United States. And with that status, there's no path to citizenship. There's no permanent avenue for staying in the United States. It's a temporary status. There has been introduction of legislation and discussion about legislation that's been kind of dubbed the Afghan Adjustment Act, that would allow Afghans to simply adjust their status, much like refugees do. After 1 year, they would be able to apply for a green card. And then after 5 years, they would be able to apply for citizenship. With that permanent status and that ability to apply for a green card, also comes the ability to apply for family to join them. Things in Afghanistan right now, from what I have heard, are very, very difficult. I've heard a great deal of concern for family that are in Afghanistan. Economic systems are decimated, and it's difficult to get the necessary supplies. This Afghan Adjustment Act would be extremely helpful for people, and that humanitarian aspect. And then just selfishly for us as a service provider and a community of service providers, the local immigration system and the local immigration service providers truly don't have the capacity to complete as many applications for asylum or applications for special immigrant visa status that would be necessary within this first year. And so the immigration system and our immigration service providers will be overwhelmed if something like the Afghan Adjustment Act isn't passed, because asylum applications and special immigrant visa applications are extremely lengthy and time consuming. And so we've already done the screening on these individuals that have been admitted to the United States, that have entered into local communities. And so we really, CMC feels like it's the right next step to support that. And so absolutely contacting representatives and kind of sharing what you know and sharing passion and interest is the best way to promote that kind of legislation.
Yeah, and I hope we can share some links in the chat before we close out tonight, so that people that are on the call tonight can go ahead and reach out to their representatives as well. Because I know, from conversations, I completely understand. I know I've been a part of the immigration application process and all those things, and I know how overwhelming it must be. We do have one other question in the chat, Sarah. This says, what about the children? I would assume that the men who had worked with the military are fairly fluent in English. But how have the local schools responded to these new students?
Eastern Iowa is truly a wonderful place. And the schools and service providers have all been extremely supportive. The schools have been eager since middle of August, when we first received word that there may be Afghans coming, the schools have been chomping at the bit to prepare and to make sure that they have kind of the framework necessary to provide, to welcome Afghan students and to be able to communicate effectively with parents as well, and to learn about kind of what is the culture that of the new community that they'll be welcoming. So we are very fortunate to have some truly wonderful schools in Eastern Iowa that really care and really do put in the work to learn about who they're welcoming.
Yeah, we have another question in the chat that I want to bring in before we make sure that you share all the myriad of ways that people on the call could be helping, donating, volunteering, all those good things. Before we also hear from Hecky and his experiences. So we have, what have you heard from Iowa elected leaders, the governor, senators, representatives, et cetera, about support for Afghan refugees and also our state legislatures?
That is a wonderful question. You know, we've been working very closely as a statewide coalition of resettlement service providers, the other agencies that resettle in Des Moines, and some in Western Iowa as well, working closely with the state. We've had numerous meetings with the governor's office and with the governor herself, who has expressed a great deal of support for the resettlement and services provided to Afghans, really working to make sure that we have, as service providers, have the support we need to be able to provide quality services. And for that, we really are grateful. You know, this idea that resettlement and especially refugee resettlement is kind of a hot topic or a divisive topic is one that is relatively new. The resettlement program as a whole has historically had bipartisan support. And I think the last I heard was that actually more refugees had been resettled under Republican, on a nationwide level, under Republican leadership than under Democratic leadership. And so we are grateful to see support of leaders after kind of having several years of rather divisiveness behind resettlement. And, you know, there's definitely a layer of the work that Afghans did to support and keep US troops safe that comes into play as well. We recently welcomed Joni Ernst to our office and were able to have her meet with some of the Afghans that have been working with us and that have been resettled through, to be able to talk about their experiences and share some of the challenges that they've faced, and are fortunate to continue to work with her office to work through some of those barriers. So we are truly, truly grateful for the support that we've experienced through this process.
That's incredible. And I can echo your sentiment. I know that I've dealt with Chuck Grassley's office on a number of occasions around immigration issues and things, and he's amazingly supportive. You know, so I can't reiterate enough the bipartisan nature historically of what you're doing. And so do you want to touch a little bit more, Sarah, now on exactly how in how many different ways and what people can do that are listening tonight and maybe listening later, because we are recording this, of how they can contribute, how they can help, how they can give, how they can volunteer?
Absolutely. So let me share my screen again here. So there are a number of different opportunities for getting engaged and getting involved. You know, on our website, we have a number of different volunteer opportunities and a volunteer sign-up form. If you are able to and interested in volunteering, volunteer opportunities include simple things, something as simple as meeting new families at the airport and welcoming them and being a presence just to say, we are glad you're here. And we're happy to welcome you to Eastern Iowa. We move everybody into new homes. So things like moving furniture, cleaning and staging homes to prepare for a new family to call that their home is always something that we look for help with. We have a mail clinic where we help people read their mail and determine kind of what follow-ups needed. So especially for multilingual individuals, that is a great way to engage and start to kind of work with our clients as well. The LIFE program that I mentioned is always looking for volunteer tutors and mentors to work with the middle and high school age youth. We also, through our education services department, do one-on-one tutoring for English, for citizenship, for certified nursing, mathematics, computer skills and computer literacy. And so they're always looking for tutors who are willing and able to commit to taking on a student. They provide all of the education. So if you're not a teacher by trade, they will give you the tools necessary to do that. And they have options for that, both virtually and in person, working as a tutor. We have a children's space where students and clients are able to bring their children into the office with them and send their children to the children's space while they, so they're better able to focus on appointments. So we need volunteers to be able to help entertain children while their parents, do their tutoring sessions or have maybe a long day full of appointments. We are always looking for donations of household goods. If you go to our website, and I can put the link in the chat in a little bit, cmc-cr.org, we have our wish list, and there's opportunities for donating gently used items, as well as purchasing items from an Amazon wish list that might be newer. If you think about all of the things in your home that you touched as you woke up in the morning. You sat up from your bed, you had a pillow on your bed, you uncovered from your blanket, you brushed your teeth, you brushed your hair. Those are all things that we provide as individuals are settling into their homes. And so it takes donations to be able to meet those needs. And then, one of the greatest assets and support that people can provide, especially if they're not local or unable to commit to some of the other volunteer opportunities or donation opportunities. I really don't want to downplay the importance of sharing our message and sharing our stories and helping to correct the conversation if you hear things that are, misnomers or misconceptions that are shared. We are with housing right now, access to or people who have relationships with landlords for affordable housing is absolutely an asset as well. And kind of taking it out one step as well is, advocating for affordable housing in our communities, because affordable housing impacts the refugees and immigrants and the Afghans that we're bringing in. And so if you want refugees and immigrants to be welcomed, affordable housing and things like access to medical care are things to pay attention to as well. So I will stop sharing and put our website link in the chat and open to.
I know Abby has also shared the volunteer link already for CMC. So
perfect. Yes.
Feel free to share any other links as well. What if people have, furnishings or kitchen items or things like that they have excess and they want to donate? What should they do, Sarah?
So if you can either call CMC, you can call our main line. Our Refugee and Immigrant Services phone number is 319-731-0445. And I can put that in the chat here.
I was going to say that again.
I'm used to just rattling it off. So you can call our main line, and you can also email info@cmc-cr.org, or even just do the contact us page on our website and connect with us, and we'll have one of our staff members respond to you, and we can coordinate any donations that you might be able to give. Occasionally we're able to go out and pick up donations from people. It certainly is easier on our staff if you can bring things to us, but we can coordinate some options there.
And I can say from experience, I go to CMC every Saturday and do one-on-one tutoring. And it's such a rewarding, valuable experience. And I know just from talking to the director of education, that they especially need volunteers who are willing to get the training and volunteer for emerging literacy students. You heard Sarah say that half are illiterate in their language, and that takes some extra attention and some, you know, extra skills and a commitment to really work in a different way with those students. So if that is you and you're interested in working with emerging literacy students, that would be a way to go as well. And they do provide all the training, and it's amazing, top quality. I can't say enough. As a professional in the field myself, I can't say enough good things about the staff at CMC. I've interacted with them professionally for years now, at the regional and the national level. They're amazing people.
Well, I've got one last.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I've got one last thing to share, but I wanna, if anyone has questions, I wanna give space for that first.
I think you're good for now. We'll see what you have. One last thing. We'll hear from Hecky and then open it up for even more dialogue.
Wonderful. Well, before I share, I do want to say, you know, I think there's always a focus on how and an interest in how we can help refugees and immigrants. And oftentimes, you know, the term refugee and, you know, by proxy now, the kind of expansion to the term Afghan parolee often carries with it this understanding of an experience that someone has been through. And that's often what we think about. But one thing that we work very hard to share with the community and really make sure we're communicating is that refugees and immigrants are more than the help they need or the help that we give. They're more than the experience that they've been through, and that they truly have a boundless potential. And so with that, I've got a quick little video of some of the people that we've worked with over the past few years, and kind of where their experience has been and telling their story.
I was a refugee. Now, I represent refugees across the state of Iowa at the Refugee Congress.
I was a refugee, now I am a citizen of the United States. I am a contributing member of the society. I'm a pharmacist, a healthcare provider, a father, a husband, a whole lot of things.
I was a refugee. Now I help make sure kids stay on track developmentally.
I was a refugee. Now I am on the soccer team.
I came in the United States as a refugee, and now I am a certified paralegal, and I'm proud of that.
I was a refugee, and now I'm a business owner.
I was a refugee, but now I am a college student.
I came here as a refugee, and now I am, as I said earlier, and I am a college graduate.
Nilikuwa mkimbizi, nilifika hapa kama mkimbizi, lakini kwa sasa hivi naweza nikasema kama siko mkimbizi, niko raia kama mwingine, na ninafanya kazi ya kuchunga watoto. Nilisoma hayo masomo, nikamaliza, nikapewa certificate, na sasa hivi ninafanya kazi hiyo ya kuchunga watoto na ninafurahi sana.
My story is more than experience as a refugee, and my story matters.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah. I know there will be more interest in questions, comments, people's experiences in helping with these efforts. But before we get to that, I really want to turn it over to Hikmatullah Jamili to share his own experiences coming here and studying and working. Heki?
Thank you, Amy. Well, before anything else, Sarah, I loved the presentation, and I wanted to say that I appreciate you and your team so much and the work that you're doing. Being on this side of the, being a refugee and a family, coming from a family of refugees, we don't really know a lot of these things that happen on your side of the work, on the side of the case workers. So I got to learn a lot, and I think this alleviates a lot of stress for me and hopefully for my family. So thank you. Before anything else, I wanted to say that. And so yeah, my name is Heki Jamili. My full name is a longer version of it is Hikmatullah Jamili. It's Arabic. I'm a Fulbright scholar from Afghanistan. I came to Iowa City to pursue a master's degree in urban and regional planning. I'm a civil engineer. Yeah, so this, I think I mean, I don't know where to start about my journey, but I feel like when I first arrived here, one of the elements that kind of affected me to my core and kind of like gave me brought up the idea that I could make this place my home was that the love and the sense of community that I felt here. I was picked from the airport, like you said, by a stranger, somebody that I didn't know, drove from Independence to Cedar Rapids to pick me up, only because she had seen one of my posts in a random group in Facebook. I was inquiring about housing and this and that in Iowa City, and she had seen, and 2 days before my arrival, she texted me and she was like, "How are you gonna get from Cedar Rapids to Iowa City?" I said, "Well, I'll take a train or a bus." And she was like, "Oh, clearly this guy has no idea of what he's getting himself into." So she came and picked me up. And I think the journey, the connection, the sense of community started from that very moment. And although my first 2 years of grad school, because I was a Fulbright scholar, I had the network of Fulbright and the faculty with me. It was, I would say, a lot better than any of my counterparts who came during these times, these desperate times, I would say. But nonetheless, after I graduated in August of last year, just 5 or 6 days after my graduation, this whole thing happened. So my original plan was to go back, because the way Fulbright scholarship works for different countries is different. In Afghanistan, it's all about leadership. So US Embassy chooses people who are from those families, from those villages that can that have a lot of people support with them. So they choose you so that you could come to the US, get state-of-the-art, the best educations in the world, and go back and go into the government. Our president was the government. 13 of our ministers were from the Fulbright. Our president was from the Fulbright. So there was those expectations for me when I got that scholarship and I got to meet our president and with the senators who frequently visited Kabul. So I had all of those ideas in my mind that, okay, degree is done, so I'm gonna go back and let's do great things. But 7 days after my degree, I got the call and it was over. I had to, come up with another plan, apparently, and I'm still trying to work on it. I still feel lost because, well, definitely now I have to I have to start over and from scratch and start thinking about my place. But at the same time, my family was thankfully evacuated towards the end of September. And since then, they've been in Qatar, they've been in Kosovo, from one camp to the other. And very recently, a couple of weeks ago, they entered the US. They're still in a base. But so it's the journey, the feeling is I just want to say that we feel lucky to have allies and lucky to have people who are creating these conversations and creating opportunities for these types of conversations to be heard. Because clearly it's a situation that anybody would lose hope, but the fact that they haven't lost hope is because our friends and allies and folks here and in other parts of the world as well who we're working to make life a little bit easier for people who've lost almost everything, like my family who just had to run away in the middle of the night and leave the house and everything in it behind, and all the investments and banks and everything. So I feel like what gives me hope and what keeps me motivated is just the amount of love that I've received in Iowa City, and that I hope for my family to receive if they end up in Iowa or anywhere else. That's yet to be determined. But what gives us hope is that the amount of friendship and love that I've received is, I feel like that's one of the things that is not communicated properly. Like one of the questions that what should an Afghan know before they come to US or to Iowa in particular, I feel like that should be that they need to know that they have friends here, that they have people who care about them, that people that would help them. This shifts the paradigm, shifts the mindset from the original thought is that I'm going to a new country. Will I be accepted by my neighbor? What if my neighbor doesn't like me? What if things like this? What if the guy running the shop next to my house doesn't like me? So I feel like it starts from there. I'm lucky to get to know this and to get to transmit this to my family. But I would say that that's something that I hope that the word gets out. The word gets out that there's help here, and that there's a system here, and that people are working here to help our allies, Afghan allies. I feel like I should open the door for any questions or anything. I guess my head's like packed with things and stories, especially because now 6 out of 8 members of my family are in the US, so they had to go through the whole process and everything. A lot of stories and anecdotes come to mind, but I feel like it's better to have questions and then have a discussion if there are any. So yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for having this opportunity. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity, and right now I work as a community planner for a small planning firm here. I look forward to maybe being part of some of the efforts that are taking place at the CIVIC as well as the CMC. I have been in contact a little bit. So yeah, I hope to be more active in that area as well. But thank you for listening, and yeah, that would be all from my part.
Heki, thank you for honoring us with your presence. Ken and Gail, did you have a question?
Said something else and I didn't see it.
Ken and Gail?
Oh, you don't need
Anyone with a question, comment, experience? I am currently just overwhelmed, and this is to me, the most meaningful interaction and sense of community I've felt in a long time. And I'm so honored to have Heki join us, to have Sara share her experience with us. I feel like we could keep going and going all night, but Newman, did you have a question or a comment?
I just want to thank Heki for responding to my request and speaking to us today. It's very meaningful to hear your story, especially in this transition time. I know it's very hard for you to make that change from a scholar and planning to do things, and then on a moment notice, basically things change very rapidly in Afghanistan, and you have to change your plans. How can you shed some more lights into that process? How did that happen to you? How did that take place?
You mean the process of
no, like you were planning on going back, and then at the time the government collapsed in Afghanistan, and then you have to stay here. Is that what kind of? I think it's a shock for you. I just want to hear a little more about that process, how you switched and you found a job and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So my visa had finished. We usually, like, Fulbright scholars have a month to kind of like visit, because one of the purposes of Fulbright is to kind of visit and know the communities around the US. So I was in my grace period, and just 10 or 15 days to my, the flight that I had booked for myself. And yeah, when the whole transition happened, and I got a call from my family that said that, well, it was my mom, and she was crying, and she was saying that we don't know what's going to happen, but the news is that the government has fallen. And I'm asking your brothers not to go out. Everybody was scared, but I have a little brother, and he's young and, energetic. And so he wanted to see what's going on. So he wanted to go out. And my mom was like, you need to talk to him and tell him that he shouldn't go out because it's not safe. So that was the starting news that I got. And I did not know what to do at the time. And I talked with my friends because I didn't even know the immigration system of that. Like, my visa is technically expired and I'm in my grace period. So I don't even have a lot of the privileges that I had as a student and as a Fulbright scholar anymore. What do I do that? So that was, I was in a state of shock, but at the same time, I had to reach out to people to seek help, legal advice. I feel like that one of the things that I did was, which was, I think it was smart, was that I had, I have one of my distant relatives is in California. So I took a flight to go there to kind of like, I didn't know where else to go. After going there and kind of sort of like giving myself a couple of days to calm down, I contacted lawyers and kind of asked them. And then through the research, I found out that I can actually stay, and there's a process called asylum. And at first I thought, well, it seemed too big of a process. How can I be a political asylum? I'm no president of no country. Like, what? But at the same time, with my background and working with the State Department and Fulbright and going to the US Embassy every month for webinars and meeting with people, pictures that have been posted, I knew that going back was just adding one more. Like, one of the things that my dad told me was that if you come, there's one more life that we have to worry about. We're trying to run away ourselves. So you can't add to that. So I knew that going back was not an option. And I learned about the asylum process and applied for that. And it took a while for me to learn and fill the forms and then see if I'm eligible. I had to look for articles and proofs and everything that kind of like point towards the danger that Fulbright scholars and people who work with the US government are facing. And to be honest, I don't really know how it all worked out, because it was messy, and all of us being in that state of shock. I'm grateful. I'm grateful, and I always say that it was God guiding my hand and my friends, and through His guidance, I found my way. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known what to do. I had to come up with a quick solution. But I found a lot of help as soon as I shared. One of the director of our school, actually, she offered me a place to stay, and one by one, I received so many help from so many different directions. And as soon as I started emailing my networks about jobs, a steep planning firm was in dire need of an urban planner, and she's also a former graduate of our college. So there was that, she knew what I'd studied and the projects that I'd worked. It worked very well. And I got a job as a community planner. At first it was an internship for 3 months, then it was a job. And after that, one after the other, I mean, this Christmas, the Christmas miracle was that my family finally was brought and they entered the US. So it was, it was kind of like that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. By the way, his name is Hikmatullah, which means the wisdom of God in Arabic. So That's kind of the connection to the story. Thank you so much, Heki, for sharing this with us.
Mashallah. And to Heki and Sarah, I know this question will be interpreted different ways for each of you and your experiences. But in the chat we have, what were some of the most helpful experiences you have had in Iowa?
Is that for me, Sarah? Is that for both?
Yeah, for both of you. So go ahead, Heki.
In terms of most helpful experience, on a social level, I feel like the amount of calls and messages I got with the message that we're here for you, let us know if you need anything. Every other day, getting a call from friends and loved ones who would check up on me, on my family. I think that was something that kept me sane and kept me focused. Otherwise, I feel like I would have been mentally, it would have been a state of in a bad state. That was, I feel like, one of the most important things that kept me going. Apart from that, I found the IC Compassion, and they helped me a lot with the process of applying for asylum and educating me how it works. And I feel like without their help, I would not have been able to even file the cases properly.
Yeah, I'm good friends with Teresa Stecker, and I know she does amazing work there.
Yeah, so Teresa was the main person who was helping me. I'm very grateful that I got to know her and the work that they're doing.
Wonderful. Sarah, do you have anything on that note to what were some of the most helpful experiences you've had in Iowa in this work?
I think kind of along similar lines, the outpouring of support and the people willing to step in and help. I think, I often say it takes many hands and many different types of experiences. We know how to do case management, but we don't know everything. And we recognize that we can't be experts in it all. And so the support and help from people in many paths are very helpful and really make it so that we can do this work.
Amazing. So we are coming close to the end of our event. I think I see a hand from Jane and Ron.
Heki, I just wanted to echo Newman's word of thanks for sharing your story and how inspirational it was. And we're glad that you seem to have landed on your feet. In part, you have some advantages that Sarah's clientele doesn't really have. One, you speak American accented English. That's a big advantage, and that you have the Fulbright network. The Fulbright secret handshake, and that will help in your network. A former student of mine is in Kosovo now as a Fulbrighter, and she's volunteering on the weekends to help Afghan refugees learn English in Kosovo. So that whole Fulbright network you may find you can call on in the future. And the fact that you have a department and a university with networks all across America and the world that you can call on and to help get your family together as well. Have you seen your family? You say they're in the States. Have you been able to be reunited with them yet?
Yes. I was not able to stay with them, but I had the opportunity to go visit them for a couple of hours when they were in DC. So I did that over the Christmas and for a couple of days after that. But they were transported to another base, and it was harder for me to visit. But I know that they're safe, and that someone like Sarah is working their cases. So it's nice.
Well, thanks very much again for sharing your story, and we hope that you continue to have success in this quick readjustment that you and your family have had to make.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
For sure. Any others? We have a few minutes remaining. If you have questions, if you have experiences of being involved through volunteering or giving of some aspect in this work that you'd like to share. I can't encourage you enough to fill out. Dylan, if you want to reshare the link to sign up to be a volunteer for this kind of work with Sara and with Catherine McAuley Center. There are multiple ways that you can give of your time, of your resources, of your talents, from learning how to build beds and put the beds together in a new house, to, you know, just going through your own house. I know I've taken kettles for some of the families and winter gloves and snow pants and all sorts of things for newly arrived people. And so you can see in the chat, the link to sign up to be a volunteer is there. I can't thank you enough, Hecky and Sara, for being here. This has been just so touching and such a rewarding thing to be a part of. I am honored to be here to hear from you, and to be a part of your stories tonight. Anybody have any last thing to share? Again, new memberships and any donations to CIVIC this week are going to be donated directly to the Catherine McAuley Center for their refugee resettlement efforts. So we encourage you to give, or to find other ways to give, if you cannot give financially. Any final words from Hecky, from Sara, from any of our attendees?
Sara, do you want to go first?
No. Oh, Heather does not want me to. He has some thoughts. You know, thank you for your support. Thank you for the work that you do in your daily lives to welcome neighbors. Oh, hi. Yeah. You want to say hi to me? Thank you all. Thank you for inviting me to come speak tonight. And Hecky, it was an honor to share with you and hear your experience as well.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for today, for listening to us, and for all the works that you guys are doing in your own capacity. And I'm grateful to be here because I think I have some new connections now, and maybe I can, now that everything has come down to some point, I speak many of the languages that Sara shared in those presentations. So maybe I could also give back and help.
Sara says yes, yes, yes.
So I'm grateful for the opportunity to make these connections today as well. And thank you. That's all.
Yeah, and I do want you to know, Hecky and Sara, that we did have nearly 60 registrants for this event. And so we will be sharing the recording with all of those people who couldn't join us live tonight, so that your message will continue to be spread and multiplied throughout our networks. And again, thank you for being here. Thank you, all of you participants and attendees, for being here and supporting in any way that you can. What a valuable experience for all of us in Eastern Iowa to hear and to learn and to share tonight with our guests. Thank you for being a part, and thank you for being a part and a supporter of CIVIC. And we hope that you'll continue to do so as we hopefully move back toward in-person visits in the very near future. Thank you and have a beautiful, beautiful night.